The waiter had been working at Patsy's restaurant in New York for 11 months when Frank Sinatra walked in at 9:47 p.m. on a Friday in October 1961. And the moment the door opened and Sinatra stepped through, still wearing his overcoat, still holding his fedora in his hand, the entire dining room seemed to recalibrate around him. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they quieted, shifted, became aware of themselves in a way they hadn't been 30 seconds earlier. And the waiter, whose name was Michael Torrino, and who was 26 years old, and had moved to New York from Philadelphia 2 years ago with dreams of becoming an actor, but was currently just trying to make rent, felt his pulse quicken because he'd been told when he started this job that Frank Sinatra came here sometimes, that Patsy's was one of his regular spots, that the owner Patsy Scognamillo and Sinatra went back decades. But Michael had never actually seen him, had started to think maybe it was just a story the other waiters told to make the place seem more important than it was. And now here was Sinatra, 10 feet away, and Patsy was walking over to greet him with the kind of warmth that you can't fake, the kind that comes from actual friendship. And Michael stood frozen by the service station trying to remember if he was supposed to do anything, say anything, or just stay out of the way. Patsy led Sinatra to table 12, the corner booth that was always held in reserve even when the restaurant was fully booked, and Sinatra sat down with his back to the wall, hung his coat on the hook beside the booth, set his hat on the seat next to him, and Patsy said something that made Sinatra smile, not the public smile, the real one. And then Patsy walked back toward the kitchen and Michael realized with a sinking feeling that table 12 was in his section. He'd been a waiter long enough to know that serving celebrities was a minefield. Some wanted to be fawned over, others wanted to be invisible, some wanted conversation, others wanted silence. And if you guessed wrong about which type they were, you'd either annoy them or offend them, and either way you weren't getting a good tip. But Michael had never served someone as famous as Frank Sinatra, never served someone who could probably get him fired with a single word to Patsy if he screwed up badly enough. And as he walked over to the table with a menu and a water glass, he ran through everything he'd been taught in training. Be polite but not obsequious. Be attentive but not hovering. Take the order efficiently and get out of the way, and hoped that would be enough. "Good evening, Mr. Sinatra," Michael said, and his voice came out steadier than he felt. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Sinatra looked up at him and Michael felt the full weight of those blue eyes, the same eyes he'd seen in a dozen movies, and for a second he forgot what he'd just asked. "Bourbon," Sinatra said. "Neat. And bring me whatever Patsy's making tonight. I don't need a menu." "Yes, sir." Michael turned to leave, but Sinatra's voice stopped him. "What's your name?" Michael turned back. "Michael, sir, Michael Torrino." "You new here, Michael?" "About a year." "You Italian?" "Yes, sir, my family's from Naples." Sinatra nodded. "Good, you know how to make a proper espresso." "I do." "Then we'll get along fine." Michael walked back to the service station, put in the bourbon order at the bar, went to the kitchen to tell Patsy that Sinatra wanted whatever he was making, and Patsy nodded like he'd expected this, like it happened every time, and Michael went back out to the dining room with the bourbon and set it down in front of Sinatra, without spilling a drop even though his hands were shaking slightly. "Thank you," Sinatra said, and he said it like he meant it, like Michael was a person and not just a waiter. And Michael nodded and walked away and spent the next 40 minutes trying to find the right balance between checking on the table and leaving Sinatra alone. The food came out. Veal parmigiana, pasta with red sauce, a side of escarole, and Michael delivered it, refilled the water glass, brought another bourbon without being asked, and Sinatra ate slowly, methodically, like he was thinking about something else. And Michael noticed that even though the restaurant was full and people kept glancing over at table 12, nobody approached, nobody asked for an autograph, nobody interrupted, because Patsy's had a rule that had been explained to Michael on his first day. If a regular customer wants privacy, you give them privacy, and if someone bothers them, you ask that person to leave. No exceptions, no matter who they are. At 10:52 p.m., Sinatra finished eating and pushed his plate away, and Michael came over to clear it. "How was everything, Mr. Sinatra?" "Perfect. Tell Patsy the veal was the best I've had in months." "I will, sir. Can I get you anything else? Dessert, coffee?" "Just espresso, 2 cups." "2 cups. Yeah, one for me, one for you. Sit down." Michael felt his stomach drop. "I'm sorry, sit down, I want to talk to you." Michael looked around the dining room. The other waiters were watching. The hostess was watching. Patsy was watching from the kitchen door. "Mr. Sinatra, I'm working." "I can't, I'll clear it with Patsy. Sit." Sinatra gestured to the seat across from him. Michael hesitated, then slid into the booth, feeling like he was breaking every rule he'd ever been taught about professional boundaries. "You're an actor," Sinatra said. It wasn't a question. Michael blinked. "How did you know?" "You've got the look, waiting tables but thinking about something else. Watching people, trying to figure them out. Every actor I know waited tables at some point. It's like a rite of passage. I've been auditioning for 2 years, haven't booked anything yet." "You will. How do you know?" "Because you're still here. Most people give up. Move back home, find a real job. The fact that you're still waiting tables after 2 years means you're serious. And serious people eventually get their break." Michael didn't know what to say to that. Sinatra took a sip of bourbon. "Let me ask you something, Michael. When you served me tonight, were you nervous?" "Very." "Why?" "Because you're Frank Sinatra." "And what does that mean?" Michael thought about it. "It means you're important. It means I could screw up and it would matter more than if I screwed up serving anyone else." "Interesting," Sinatra said. "So you treated me differently than you treat a regular customer." "I tried not to." "But you did. I could tell. You were too careful, too formal. You wanted to make sure I was happy, so you overcompensated. You refilled my water glass 3 times even though I'd barely touched it. You brought me a second bourbon before I asked for it, which was good instinct, but you brought it too early, which means you were watching me too closely. You were performing the role of perfect waiter instead of just being a waiter." Michael felt his face flush. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Don't apologize. I'm not criticizing, I'm teaching." Sinatra leaned back in the booth. "You know what the difference is between a good actor and a great actor?" "No, sir." "A good actor plays the character. A great actor becomes the character. You were playing the role of waiter tonight. You hit all the marks, said the right things, did the right things, but you never became it. You were always aware that you were serving Frank Sinatra, and that awareness created distance." Michael thought about that. "So what should I have done?" "You should have treated me like anyone else. Not because I'm not important, but because the service is important. Every customer deserves the best you can give, whether they're Frank Sinatra or some guy who just walked in off the street. When you treat people differently based on who they are, you're not serving them. You're serving their reputation, and reputations don't tip well." Michael smiled despite himself. The espresso arrived, delivered by another waiter who set down 2 cups and left without a word. Sinatra picked up his cup, took a sip, set it down. "Good, you know how to make espresso, that's something. My grandmother taught me." "Where's she from?" "Naples, same as my family." "She's still alive?" "Yeah, lives in South Philly. I visit when I can." "Call her more," Sinatra said. "Trust me. You think you have time, you don't." They drank their espresso in silence for a moment. Then Sinatra said, "You're going to make it, Michael. I don't know when, I don't know in what, but you've got something, I can see it. You just need to stop trying so hard. Stop trying. Stop performing. Stop worrying about what people think. Stop being so aware of yourself that you forget to be present. When you're on stage or in front of a camera or serving tables, the only thing that matters is the moment you're in. Not who's watching, not what it means for your career, just the moment. You get that right, everything else takes care of itself." That's easier said than done. Of course it is. Everything worth doing is easier said than done. That's what separates the people who make it from the people who don't. The ones who make it are willing to do the hard thing even when it's uncomfortable. Sinatra finished his espresso, pulled out his wallet, laid 3 $20 bills on the table, enough to cover the meal 3 times over. "Keep the change." "And Michael?" "Yes, sir. Next time I come in here, treat me like any other customer, you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Sinatra stood, put on his coat, picked up his hat, and walked toward the exit. Patsy met him at the door, shook his hand, said something Michael couldn't hear, and Sinatra left. Michael sat in the booth for another minute, looking at the $60 on the table, replaying the conversation in his head. Then he stood up, cleared the dishes, and went back to work. 6 months later, Michael Torrino booked his first role. Small part in an off-Broadway production. It led to another small part, then a bigger one, then a television appearance. Within 3 years, he was making a living as an actor, not famous, not rich, but working. In 1968, Michael was cast in a film directed by someone who knew Frank Sinatra, and during a production meeting, Sinatra's name came up. "I met him once," Michael said. "At Patsy's restaurant, I was waiting tables. What was he like?" Someone asked. Michael thought about it. "He told me to stop performing and start being present. Best acting advice I ever got." "Did you take it?" "I tried, still trying." Years later, after Sinatra died, Michael was interviewed for a documentary about Sinatra's impact on the people around him. The interviewer asked if he had any stories. "Just one," Michael said. He told them about the night at Patsy's, about the espresso, about being told to treat Sinatra like anyone else. "Did you?" The interviewer asked. "Did you treat him like anyone else the next time?" "There wasn't a next time. He never came in on one of my shifts again. But I thought about what he said every time I served someone, every time I walked into an audition, every time I got in front of a camera, stop performing, be present, and it changed everything." "How?" "Because I realized he wasn't just talking about acting. He was talking about life, about how we treat people, about how we show up. I was so worried about impressing him that I forgot to just do my job. And he saw that. And instead of getting annoyed or complaining or ignoring me, he sat me down and taught me something I needed to learn." "Do you think he knew you'd become an actor?" "I think he knew I had a choice. Either keep performing or start living. And he wanted me to choose the right one." "And did you?" Michael smiled. "I'm still working on it." The question is this. When you're Frank Sinatra and you notice that the waiter serving you is nervous, overcompensating, performing the role of perfect service instead of just serving, and you could ignore it, or you could complain to the manager, or you could leave a big tip and forget about it. But instead you ask him to sit down, share espresso, and tell him that the key to success is being present instead of performing. Is that mentorship? Or is that control because you're not just giving advice? You're showing him that you see through his act, that you can read him better than he can read himself. And when he takes that advice and it changes his career, when he spends the next 40 years thinking about what you said in that booth, was that generosity, or was that making sure he'd always remember that Frank Sinatra was the one who saw his potential before he did? And maybe there's no difference. Maybe every act of kindness from someone powerful contains an element of power, because the gift isn't just the advice. It's the fact that someone important enough to ignore you chose not to. And that choice, that moment of attention, becomes the thing you measure yourself against for the rest of your life, not because you want to, but because you can't help it. Because when Frank Sinatra tells you to stop performing and be present, you don't just hear career advice. You hear an assessment of who you are and who you could be, and the distance between those two things becomes the work of a lifetime.